Welcome to Making a Mark, the podcast about leadership and practice in architecture. Join me, Mark Steppan, an architect with over 45 years of experience, as we explore opinions on leadership, soft skills, and their impact to the practice. Today, we're talking about architectural practice coaching, and I'm fortunate enough to have with us a good friend and a person I've worked with for quite a few years, Bob Iggulden. Welcome, Bob.
Hey, Mark.
Nice to have you here.
Thanks.
And I know we've had some offline discussions on today's topic and a little bit of discussion prior to actually this interview, but I wanted to kind of introduce you briefly to the folks. So you've got over 40 years of experience, like I do. So we're a similar age and experience level, and you worked for multiple large-ish firms, say 35 people and more, that are primarily doing high density multifamily housing, whether it's market rate or affordable, as well as other project types. You've also worked for some small firms early in your career, and you had your own firm early in your career.
In between.
Yeah. So with that intro and stuff, I'd like to say welcome, and let's chat about today's topic.
Cool.
So Bob, we're going to talk about leadership today and what that might mean to you, what that might mean to me, and what we think it really means in the profession today, maybe even as compared to when we started, but certainly where it is today and where we think it might be going. So simply put, what do you think to you the word leadership means?
Leadership, I'd say to inspire both clients and people, coworkers you're working with. They can be both employees and they can be coworkers. And the ability to be able to get a team to work and row in the same direction for me.
Okay. So do you feel that it's about helping develop people to be better people and leaders in their own right? Or is leadership something that's really restricted to the talented few?
Well, I don't think everybody is cut out to be a leader. I'm going to have some where it's a natural talent, some that will learn it, and others that don't care. But I think it's good leaders have the ability to basically search out the ones that want to be leaders and can actually be leaders.
Okay. So,
And take interest in being leaders.
right. I think that a lot of people don't know that they could be good leaders. And you don't have to lead everybody in a firm to be a good leader. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that.
So realistically then, as we develop today's discussion, people could be thought of as leaders, even if they're simply one of a team member on a project. All right, so continuing, we were just talking here about you can be a leader even if you were just a normal staff member on a job, right? You could be leading in that you help make sure that others know what they're doing on the project.
So that's a leader by title versus a leader by not experience, but...
Well, I'd say it's more of a leader by how you see yourself working and how you work. In other words, you don't have a title. You're just one of the Revit draftsmen. You are responsible for certain aspects of a project, but you don't have the title, and you may not be given lots of responsibility by your team leader for the project, but by your own nature, you just kind of take to helping other people within the team know what their responsibilities are And even though you don't know everything because you're low on experience level, you're still helping others with their tasks and making sure yours are getting done and communicating things to the rest of the team.
Mm-hmm.
So that's somebody to me that's already developing into a leader, sort of in spite of the rest of the team, potentially. Have you seen that much in your experience in different firms?
Yes and no. I think I see more leadership coming out of people as they gain experience and confidence in what they're doing. I think people who are confident about what task they're working on, be it one task or another, it's easier for them to basically explain or assist others to learn that task or whatever it is in an easier way that makes it so that person is able to understand and able to accept the assistance.
Okay. That makes sense. And I appreciate the pushback because there's not too many people that were fitting into the role that I was describing if they're very inexperienced. It's just hard to, even if you have a lot of self-confidence, you're going to be lucky to be in a situation where you can then actually use that self-confidence to help others. I think a lot of the teams that are put together on projects do rely heavily on levels of expertise, past performance, and titles of roles.
Architecture, there's so much to know about our industry, about being an architect, or even being just a draftsperson in an architectural firm. The codes are significant. They're massive as far as what you need to understand and how the codes drive design. That I think your young people especially are constantly in a mode of learning and relying on experienced people for that kind of leadership to show them how things are done or kind of the ropes, at the same time not stifling them. So that could be an interesting kind of way to define leadership, is how do you lead and teach without stifling?
Totally true. So you're going to try to lead with, so that's talking about leading with respect and empathy, for example, because you're going to lead with sort of hopefully an understanding of each person that you're working with. And you're not going to have that if you don't have respect and you don't do things respectfully, and if you don't have some empathy and diplomacy and professionalism and all these words. Again, this is soft skill stuff that we're not taught typically. I wasn't taught these things in school.
Nor was I.
Did I learn them in my first job that lasted 31 years? Yes, some of them. Did I learn them more in a second job because I could compare to the first one? And the situations were completely different from a small and mid-sized firm to a very large firm? Yes, because the dynamics of firm project relationships, the dynamics of the leadership of the firm being much, much larger, and the whole difference between the firm structures, let alone the work product, dictated a different quantity of people, a different level of experience, potentially. And so that also created a lot of different dynamics between people to people relationships that most of the people in the firm I was with for a long time wouldn't have experienced while being in that firm, because it wasn't really necessary based on the size of the firm, the consistency of staff, and a variety of other things. So do you think that this set of leadership skills, some of which we just talked about, are there other skill sets that make a good leader?
Well, as I've said before, as I've said before, it really depends upon the firm you're in, whether it's a large firm, small firm, different personalities, different experiences of those personalities. Really go a long way to really defining how you develop as a leader. And you have to want to be able to watch those aspects of people. Because I don't think I was born a leader. I think I've learned it. And with experience, I wanted I want to get back to the industry, those things that I've learned. Boy, it's awful hard, I would think, as a young person to really develop as a leader early on, just because there's just so much to learn. And we become so segmented and so profit driven that I don't think it's just a skill that's really taught in many firms.
So that kind of leads to the question, should it be? And should the leaders of firms, by title, really make sure that they are providing an environment of teaching and coaching?
That would be great. I think it might be a little unrealistic just because of the kind of the schedule and profit motivation of particular any individual or given firm. I mean, it changes. There's different from firm to firm, but I think it's worthy of a class or two in college where everyone can be exposed to what leadership is. I mean, like my first exposure to leadership is allowing yourself to be vulnerable. And this was a whole lean training series that I went through, mandated by a client. And it was interesting following. It was a 4-day seminar. It had to have been quite expensive because all the architects and contractors were involved in this thing. And I came away from it really thinking to myself, I can apply these things throughout my entire life. And that also started to gel me more into not working in a silo. If I need help, not being afraid to ask for it from anybody, which I think people then came to me with when they had the same problems. And so we start to work more as a team. And I think that's been very beneficial to me. I'm not sure I quite answered the question, but
Well, you did and you didn't, but that was a very important point that you made. I do think that, in my opinion, the leaders of a firm with the title that are helping to lead a firm do have a responsibility,
I think so.
period, to help develop their staff for a variety of reasons. One, the reality, at least in my opinion, and I think it'd probably be born to be true through data, once it was all collected, is that staff productivity is going to go up when leadership is in a better place, let's say, and that they're more comfortable in their environment. They will, as a simplistic whole, perform better because they feel better about everything. Okay, again, better is like a soft word, right?
I think that's very true. And unfortunately for me, it took me, because I didn't really realize any of this until much later in my career. I just kind of wish I had been exposed to this kind of thought process and way of thinking about interacting with other people much earlier in my career, like right out of school if I could have. Because I mean, many times we graduate from school and we work with people that didn't go to school. They just wanted to become a draftsman. And so they don't have that kind of design background and stuff that a lot of us that have graduated come out with. And so they aren't going to really, many of them don't really contribute in terms of leadership. But I mean, when I was young, I really didn't understand the whole notion of leadership, other than you're either running a firm or you're not. And starting out in small firms like I did, maybe it had been completely different. I think it would have been different for me if I'd have started out in a larger firm and been exposed to different personalities. So that's kind of a retrospective, like, oops. Not to say that small firms are particularly bad, but I did move around a few times. I got exposed to a few different personalities, but they were always in small firms.
Sure. There's a side part of what you just talked about that I think is really important. In the profession of architecture, not necessarily directly related to leadership yet, but maybe we can show it is. When you're in a small firm, generally speaking, the responsibilities of each person are magnified because we have fewer people to do sometimes the same amount of work as a larger firm.
Or the wide variety of work,
And
different
wide variety.
aspects of the work.
Right.
Yeah.
So in many instances, young folks are put into positions of having to do things they have no idea how to do. And they either struggle with it, succeed with it, ask to have for some information and help to do it. But they potentially have the opportunity to have a lot more experience in a variety of projects and business situations and client situations at that age and level of experience in a small firm than they might in a larger firm at the same age. So do you think that helps develop a level of self-confidence in those people that would allow them earlier in their career to start understanding about being a leader as compared to somebody that gets hired by a very large firm and spends the first 5 years of their life doing nothing but drawing stairs and not really feeling comfortable to try to break out further in that? That also implies that may be a situation where there's not very good leadership at a higher level, understanding what they've got. But how do you feel about that difference from the experience level that you get at a small firm to that you would be getting at a larger firm?
Well, the small firms that I worked at generally stuck to one product type, whether it be mini storages or single family housing. They didn't really do much of anything else other than whatever product type it was. So we did get very focused on the overall aspect of that particular product, from design into construction, although it was all very small scale. I think there's certainly an opportunity for young folks to learn about leadership when they kind of have to deal with the entire spectrum of services from start to finish, versus in a larger firm, they may just focus on a small part of it, and then there are other people that take it from there. So there is that aspect. I think also there's a lot of learning to do with really understanding the whole field of architecture, that not only the glamorous parts, the design and that, but really understanding the liability insurance, the business aspect, how accounts are run. And I say business accounts like banking accounts, really kind of understanding and grasping those things. If you're going to set up your own business, you really have to have an understanding of that. I know when I set up my business, I really had no idea what I was doing. And I learned by the school of hard knocks. I mean, I was reasonably successful at it, but it was still quite a learning process for me. And I think it could have been a lot easier had those things kind of been taught in school. But as far as actual training in these small firms, at least I didn't get the leadership training in order to be confident about the things that I was doing. I don't know, I know that's probably digressed a bit, but.
Oh, it's a topic that actually allows for a lot of digression because it's hard to define some of this. And leadership and leading people and working with people. And that's what we do. Yes, we draw, we design, but we, on a daily basis, are always working with somebody in the office. And you might be working on a daily basis with a client, a contractor, a consultant, or another person at your firm has more than one office, another person in the firm at a different office. And that relationship is different because you're not in the same office. So architecture really is a Renaissance profession because you have to know a lot of things Yes. What do you have to know? You have to know about all these people skills, about working with people. It really is a people profession.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's kind of like retail in that it's a people profession. You're dealing with people constantly. You're not just dealing with a computer and Revit and model building. And these are all parts of this very large and complicated profession that we're a part of. There's the business aspects of things. There's knowing about the codes. There's knowing how to interface with a client, which I think that in your answer about the experience in a smaller firm, some of the people work in those smaller firms then get to interact with the client in ways that they wouldn't at a larger firm for many years.
That's very true. And it's interesting too, like in a larger firm, you're constantly interacting with not even clients or contractors, but other consultants like mechanical engineers, structural engineers on a far deeper basis than you would in a smaller firm where you just might have only a structural engineer or only a civil engineer because the electrical, mechanical, and plumbing systems don't really come into play in what you're doing. I did run into that quite a bit. And so there was a limited exposure there. But yeah, it's different small versus a larger firm in terms of who you're dealing with.
Right. So in learning or being exposed to some of these other aspects of what we do as an architect, communicating with core consultants, communicating with clients. If you're in a 3-person firm, the likelihood is person 2 and person 3 are doing not only a lot of the drawing, but are doing some of the coordination with consultants, if not all of it, and maybe even most of the client contact. If the main person in the firm, the owner of the firm, is having to do all the marketing and getting the work and all the business end of things and stuff, he or she has got to rely on the rest of the staff, be them 1 or 2 people, to do literally everything else.
Mm-hmm.
So they're being exposed to these skills in some fashion that at least we're talking about as being necessary to be leaders.
They're learning the skills on the spot.
Right. Nobody's necessarily teaching them because there's not a bunch of people with time to coach them in all these things. It's not like, oh, the leadership coaching session that I'm developing that's multi-sessions with multiple staff attending and having homework and doing all these things can be done in a 3-person firm. But you can still take people to lunch and you can still have conversations and you can still then react to, hey, that was a great job with that client. I was doing something, doing the bank business and stuff, and I overheard you on the phone with a really important client for that really big house remodel. And just the way you handled the client professionally with diplomacy, and you were respectful and you seemed to understand their issues really well, and you had really good answers about how we would look into dealing with them and helping the situation.
Positive reinforcement.
So it's like that kind of positive reinforcement goes a long way in that person's development and self-confidence growth.
Self-confidence growth, yeah.
And when you have more self-confidence, then you're more likely to also ask questions when you know you don't know something. And part of being a good leader is knowing when you don't know something and who to go to try to get some help. And then imparting that way of working to the others that you're actually responsible for. So you mentioned the word earlier that I think is really, really important, that, not to plug a webinar I've done, but I did do one on leading vulnerable and complex projects. And it really is talking about soft skills that we're talking a lot about today. And that's, you mentioned people being vulnerable. And when you were learning how to run your own firm, you were very vulnerable to what you didn't know. potentially able to derail your firm on a variety of fronts. It's not like you had a partner to turn to who had already had a firm and gone, hey, what did you do? How did we start to set this up? And how do you work with your staff? I mean, I've got a person who's fabulous and they just don't want to do stuff right. Whatever it might be, you don't have that. So a lot of being a good leader, I think, or just being a good person,
And just being a good person.
is knowing that it's okay to be vulnerable. But that only goes so far if your position or where you're working or that condition actually allows you to be vulnerable. If there's push down, pushback, criticism because they don't understand, then you're going to retreat from being vulnerable.
Right.
And you're going to retreat from what's necessary for you to continue to grow, thus the firm continue to grow, thus the project to do better. And it's this circle that gets smashed.
I think early on, it would be very helpful if people understood that it's okay to be vulnerable and it's okay to ask questions. So many times I've run into in the past, people just aren't willing to ask questions about whatever it is they're working on, or how to deal with a situation. And then it blows up and becomes an issue when we all find out later that something has happened and it's now going to be a problem to fix. So, and honestly, I didn't learn really that it's okay to be vulnerable until really later in my career. After in running my own firm, I just did everything. And I worked long hours and I made sure stuff didn't get too out of whack, but I wasn't a good teacher either. So I kind of deserved what I got many times. And it wasn't until I got to work around really talented people in some of these larger firms that I worked for that I really started to learn about what it takes to be a leader and that it's okay to not know everything, because you can't possibly know everything, and to ask questions and to rely on other people and let them know that they can rely on you. It made for a much happier existence as a person, and just feeling more proud about the work product we were turning out. And the clients returned the favor. They typically all agreed that the projects they're getting are top notch. And they appreciate working with us architects, and in turn we get rework. So that's very rewarding to me. And I'd learned that late in career.
So very, very interesting points. I'm smiling because it ties into so many things that we'll be talking about in future podcasts and with other interviewees. But the whole aspect of having the space to be vulnerable and a leader understanding they and their team needs to be able to work with vulnerability and handle it with empathy and respect. There might be a reason why somebody's not being productive on a daily or weekly basis. And it probably, or it certainly potentially, has nothing to do with work. It could very well have something to do with their mother's been sick, or they've been sick, or all kinds of things outside in the real life, outside of the 9 to 5 or 8 to 6 or 8 to midnight architecture profession, that impact us on a day-to-day basis. That no matter how hard we try, will impact our time at work. They impact us emotionally, mentally, and it's nearly impossible to keep that from impacting what we do on a daily basis. So a bad leader is the one who then blames the person for not getting things done and takes no interest in knowing why.
Right.
That's not a leader.
Right.
Period. They may be titled as a leader, but they're not acting like a leader. A real leader would have those skills, even if they're developing skills to go, hey, I noticed that your productivity on getting these documents and hitting these deadlines has been down. There have been a lot of red lines that haven't been picked up. You're kind of relying on Revit too much, and it's only as good as the inputter, which is you. What's going on? Is everything okay outside?
Mm-hmm.
And then if you have over time developed enough respect of your staff back to you, they may actually be willing to say, yeah, this is what's going on, and I've not been sleeping, and I've got these family issues, and it's just so much stress, and I'm trying my best, but it's really hard to balance everything. And the good leader will listen, and they won't judge, and then they'll see what they can do to help. The bad leader will judge and not try to help.
Yeah, the important note here is not to judge as a leader.
Right.
If you're going to instill faith and confidence in your coworkers, in you, then you can't judge. You have to be a good listener. Again, something I learned later in my career, I wish I had learned right off the bat. I think I probably would have had a more successful career, quite honestly. So yeah, I completely agree.
Now, where are we taught this?
I was never taught this.
So
Maybe there was an expectation that I would already know this, but it certainly wasn't the case. And I mean, even like counseling in school really wasn't, there were no set meetings with my counselor. And I mean, I had a counselor, but it just wasn't on my priority list to go talk to that counselor about classes that I should take or what really I wanted to do with my practice once I graduated. I mean, because by the time you're fourth year student in school, you're pretty dedicated to become an architect. And I mean, at that point, you either make a decision, I'm going to continue with this or go do something else. But most of us, we stuck through it. I know my peers that I graduated with continued and are licensed architects and very successful at it as well. But no, it'd be nice to have learned at least something about leadership and human interaction that may not be natural to everybody early on.
yeah. So it kind of begs the question, can you be a bad leader or a poor leader? Bad's maybe not really the best choice of words. Can you be a poor leader and have a successful firm?
Yes.
I'd say we both agree. Yes, you can. And there's been historically lots of
great examples.
Fabulous architects that we studied in school that are probably would be determined to be very poor leaders.
Right.
And a lot of their staff hated them or didn't like them or didn't really like working there, but they did because of who those people were and the projects they got to work on. That's a model. It's not a really good model for long-term success. And it's not really a model for longevity of a firm based on really good principles. I'm not sure that there's a consistent why there of what they're doing and why they're doing architecture. So again, I think it keeps coming full circle to the concept that in order to have a long-standing firm and be able to keep generating and developing the staff to continue the firm in the future, because everybody's going to retire at some point. So if you really believe in the basis of your firm as being a worthwhile enterprise, helping the world create better spaces for people, for example, you need people to carry that torch forward who believe the same thing. And you can't expect that to just happen. You have to help develop it.
Agree.
And that's your leadership requirement. Another aspect of things is if you're titled, oh, I'm a senior associate, yay. Doesn't that have some leadership responsibilities to those that are not so fortunate to be titled, shall we say?
Yes and no. Some people get titled just based on years of experience, but aren't and probably will never be real leaders. And others don't get titled, but are probably natural leaders. So how do you make those selections? Part of it, I think, is based on skill set and ability to create and produce the work. Boy, it's really, for me, it gets back to human interaction and how you work with your peers on a day-to-day basis, where they can, if you've got skill sets, they can rely on you for assistance, and you're teaching, but on the same scale, it's okay that you can rely on them for assistance as well, because you're not going to always have all the answers. Titled people, I mean, are they natural leaders? Not necessarily. I've seen titled people that nobody liked, and people won't deal with it. Coworkers won't work with them, don't like to. Nobody likes to get yelled at.
No, and that's not a basis for good respect.
Mm-mm.
And
I got to see it though firsthand, and I got to say to myself, and in my observation, I tried to develop my skills of observation, that those kinds of personalities and that way of interacting with other people wasn't where I wanted to go. So it's always been a joy for me to really watch and look at people who really had the ability to work and not corral, but be able to work as a team with a bunch of other people, and everybody get along and work towards the same goal.
it's a lot more fun.
It's a lot more fun.
Right.
I think everyone's life is much happier, and I think it's way better for the firm if you have a staff that enjoys working with each other and loves the work that they're producing, I always appreciate the client parties at the end. We get to experience the space that we spent so much time creating, because I mean, that's what we're all here for. We're here to create environments and space for people, no matter what it is. And I always enjoy it's kind of, I don't know if it's weird or not, but I just enjoy seeing spaces that I've got to work on or design that I know will survive me, that will be used and appreciated for years to come. That's exciting to me.
Thanks for that point of view. And I think that we should all realize how lucky we are to be involved in this profession that does create housing and work environments and death environments and health environments for the world, which wouldn't be the same if we weren't in it. That's not standing on a high horse. It's saying, hey, we help as a large factor in creating environment spaces, building spaces between buildings that allow us as humans to continue to grow and hopefully be here for a long time.
And inspire others.
And inspire others to continue that. And good leadership does that.
Sometimes, well, it's interesting because this is a little bit of a field, but sometimes we do a really bad job. And we develop housing in the 50s and 60s that by the 80s we're deciding we're going to demo this. Clearly not its life cycle, and then we enjoy blowing them up and building something that actually benefits society and more compassionately than what we've done before. But it's a learning experience for all of us.
And part of that's almost a perfect end to this podcast. That's amazing. I think that there's two aspects of things that we could continue in another discussion, because I think they're too long, but we've started to hint at them. One is the vulnerability concept and how to understand when things are vulnerable and how do you get into and fix a situation. And vulnerability applies to all kinds of things within a project or a firm and staff. And the other thing is thinking about the change in the profession from a technology standpoint. We've gone from talking about when we weren't really being trained in any of these skills many, many years ago, and our technology was different. We didn't have email, we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have computers. Communication was very different than it is today.
I will date myself and say my first project was hand drawn.
Well, I drew for many, many years up here. and a part of me wants to go, that's still the better way to go because of the brain, hand, paper coordination that doesn't exist with a computer.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a connectivity that's really important. And so then that becomes a challenge to how to import that or make sure that exists when you're dealing with a computer, whether it's CAD, Revit, or whatever.
Did we develop a 3D mind much sooner than the kids are now? With some of the 3D modeling programs that are out there that appear, and I'm doing quotations, air quotes, appear to do all the 3D modeling for you.
I think if you think back to not just us when we started, but way back to early buildings, and even if you go back to the pyramids or anything, somebody was envisioning things in very large ways within their head.
Had to.
And they accomplished amazing feats. Some of the 7 wonders of the world that are still there, and none of it had anything to do with computers. That being said, computers are wonderful.
Love them.
AutoCAD, Revit, other production design, 3D modeling programs, wonderful capabilities. But we just need to remember that they're tools.
Right.
They're not an end goal or end result or the thing. And they can be as wrong as people can be wrong, partly because people are entering information. But as I was starting to say, I think it leads to the next conversation, which is then how does leadership work in the architecture profession moving forward? Now that artificial intelligence, now known as AI, is becoming forefront in the conversation at AIA National and conventions, and many firms are starting to use AI for a variety of tasks, a quick rendering of something, etc. How is that going to play a factor in staff development and leadership skill development and firm development? Are we going to understand how to integrate this somewhat untapped potential technology in ways that do not create problems for us and problems for the profession? I'll take your answer on that, and then I think we can conclude today's podcast.
Well, it's interesting because AI is coming at us so fast that I think in many respects, we're kind of, as a profession, unprepared for it. This is something that I think should be integrated into the school programs now, even though it's next year's program on this might be different as the school program, just because AI has changed that fast in a year. So I think architects coming up, being trained and coming out of the profession, really need to have a grasp of what they need to know about AI and how they can use and manipulate the tool to better the practice of where they are and what they're doing. Again, AI is, at least to me right now, is a tool and not a replacement. And I think that's how we should be looking at it. I use it a bit for research. I could see it being used by developers and entities to replace some of the things that we do as architects. But I think so the field doesn't become stifled in only what we've done in the past, because I mean, AI, at least at this point, doesn't invent anything new. It just kind of reprocesses stuff that we've done in the past. So, I mean, I look forward to the next Frank Lloyd Wright, but I don't think that's going to come from AI, if you know what I mean. So, Frank Gehry, love these guys. So,
Well, it's going to be an interesting conversation. And I don't certainly profess to have answers yet, but I think it's a subject worth continuing to try to understand, because it's not going to go away.
It's not
And
going to go away.
Since it's not going to go away, which is fine, then we need to really come to terms with an ever-changing technology, how to make use of that in a way that works with that technology and with us as humans.
Mhm.
And that is going to be a challenge. And I think hopefully we're all up for it.
Hopefully we're up for it, and hopefully we don't think that it's something that we look at as doing our job for us, because I don't think it's that anytime soon. But that is just a tool that we need to constantly be checking and constantly be manipulating.
Right.
And architects, in terms of construction and stuff, I mean, that's our job anyway.
Yeah. Great. Thank you so much, Bob. I want to again thank Bob Iggulden for joining us today on
Thank you.
Making a Mark podcast on architectural practice coaching and other fun discussions on the practice of architecture. I think that on that note, we'll say goodbye for today.
Great.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you all for listening to Making a Mark, where we continue to expose, emerge, expand, and empower the practice of architecture. We look forward to seeing you next time.